morning. You're all very welcome to Retail Summit. My name is Stephen Morrissey. I'm the Deputy Chief Commercial and Community Experience Officer for a Specialty Coffee Association. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Roland Horne, who is the founder and CEO of WatchHouse Coffee. WatchHouse was founded in 2014, and Roland has extensive experience in the small to medium sized businesses. He holds directorships with property development funds, Verum, Domus, and Coutts and partners, and has an MSc in economic history from the London School of Economics. Roland is currently pursuing his Executive MBA at the University of Oxford, and I sort of came upon WatchHouse not long after I moved back to London a couple of years ago, and sort of first encountered it on just social media, and then started running into some of the shops and hearing some friends talk about it, and particularly interested in what they were doing and the approach they had, and then became aware of sort of their growth plans. And so delighted to be joined by Roland. So Roland, are you here to join me?
I'm here. Just wait. How are you? How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Thank you very much. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for the introduction there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe I didn't capture great. Could you speak a little bit, maybe to start us off for those who aren't aware of WatchHouse? Could you give us a quick kind of snapshot of the company and your role there?
Sure. So as I say, we started WatchHouse in 2014, and I use the word we, although I'm the founder of the business. I started it myself in September 2014. I effectively am a co-founder, in that my operations director, Steph Gregg, joined us within sort of a couple of months of starting the business. So you'll often hear me refer to the word we, and certainly now the business is very much about the team and what we're doing. So we started in 2014. I think in some ways I came into the industry as being, in some ways, a slightly frustrated retail consumer, and it wasn't just coffee. My frustration, it was just generally about store experience and how I felt it could be done in a much more authentic way. And I think after doing a fair amount of traveling, Australia in particular, and South Korea, Japan, I came to realize that, fundamentally the authenticity, I think, of the retail experience in the UK certainly needed some improvement. And it seemed fairly obvious to me that as an operator, you want to be creating experiences and spaces and product that ultimately you want to enjoy and experience yourself as a consumer. And I think there seemed to be a disconnect there between operators generally, I would say, in the sort of larger space. I'm talking here sort of stores and cafes and F&B operators of sort of 3+ spaces. There seems to be this disconnect between ultimately what you want as a consumer and what was being offered. And I think you saw, and you still continue to see, sort of local heroes, 1 and 2 shop operators that really resonate within the community. And what is that special sauce ultimately, and why do I want to go to those operators over and going to other larger? And that seemed a bit wrong. And I think at that point we sort of established WatchHouse to challenge that perception, and in some ways kind of naively. I remember, I'm happy to say this, and I kind of very vividly remember kind of being quite critical of Pret-a-Manger and kind of going, like, what are they, they're just cookie cutter, and what are they doing? And of course I've gone, I've sort of grown up myself a little bit there and come to realize what that business is, and how, ultimately fantastic they've been in terms of doing what they do in their space. But we kind of came to the perception that we want to challenge this notion of sort of cookie cuttering, everything's about the bottom line. And we wanted to come and do something a bit more interesting fundamentally. So that was the premise of WatchHouse being founded, and that stretched across products. The overall product being coffee led, but obviously the food as well being a very important part of what we do. Right through to the actual spaces that you're sitting in, and actually how ergonomic the things have been designed, and is the music right, and is the smell right, and all the things that you just want as a human, really. So I think we kind of want to understand.
Well, so when you were making that observation, was that you were sort of outside of coffee at that point? You were a consumer, you were kind of into specialty coffee, but you were just kind of noticing this disparity between, like you said, those couple of kind of heroes and then the larger group. So did you come at it then with a desire, like, when you did the first shop, Was it, let's just do one of these and see how this goes, or was it
Yeah.
kind of central to the idea all the time of having a number of shops?
Yeah, I by nature, I mean, my background, without boring everybody too much, as you've already sort of succinctly put it together, was that that I started out of, well, whilst in my undergraduate university, an aquarium design business, which was, I guess, a bit of a kind of passion at the time for me. And that was basically installing and building fish tanks in people's homes and offices and casinos and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And I did that for sort of the early part of my 20s. And I enjoyed sort of the building element of that. And I enjoyed going into a space and creating something and actually then seeing it grow. I'm sure there's some sort of deep psychological reason why I enjoy that. But nevertheless, I enjoy it, and I haven't managed to find out why I enjoy it so much. But I enjoy going and creating spaces ultimately for different, I guess, energy exchanges. I suppose if you want to get super spiritual about it, and I guess then, yeah, and then in 2014 or 2013, sorry, I was approached by a friend of mine actually at the time. Which is, you know, I've got this small space I'm looking at. It's an old watch house, and you know, do you want to come in? And I was kind of at the time focusing on my aquarium business, and it was successful. And I just said, listen, I'm happy to back you, and I'll finance it, sorry, and you can run it. And in the end, he couldn't fulfill that. He couldn't come up and make it work. He had his own commitments elsewhere in the F&B sector. So in the end, I signed the lease and went alone. And I think that the same, I guess, primordial spiritual reasons why I liked sort of the building the aquarium part was also then, you know, that scratch was itched, or the other way around. in the coffee, I really enjoyed building spaces and seeing how people interacted, and you know, seeing, you know, parents coming in with their kids. And one case I always quote is there's a mum and son who have been coming into WatchHouse Bermondsey Street, the original one, from the very start, and they sort of set up an Instagram account, and it was, I won't say the handle because it's probably not appropriate, but basically it was this person's mother and the kid's name, right? Kind of charted the whole way through 2012, I think it was, when the kid was born, right through until now. And you kind of see, and it kind of charts going into WatchHouse and buying like chocolate muffin and coffee, and I think and seeing the joy those kinds of things happen. And there's many examples of that across our space and other specialty coffee spaces. But I think that's something special about that. I mean, there's something really special about it. And I think sometimes we don't really sit back and take readings really about how great that is.
I think I said this to you before. It was a conversation I was having with some friends recently about, especially with retail spaces, you know, you put so much time into investing in the design of it and considering what you want the experience to be. But like that kind of, like what you said there about kind of seeing how people interact with them, it's almost like anticipating that you can only do 70% of it. The other 30% or even more is going to be determined by how you decide to use your space. You know, and it won't always be exactly as you intended, you know. And there's both there's the trauma of that and there's the joy in that. That it doesn't, you know, why didn't you go that way? I wanted you to go that way and then order.
Without doubt.
Do you feel that I don't know, I'm recalling as you're talking, another piece of advice I was given one time was that the opening is easy. It's kind of carrying the same, you know, 5 years later, 2 years later, you know, 10 years later, having the same sort of attention to detail and care as you did on a first opening week, as you did the whole way through. So I'm just, as you're saying about like the joy of opening new places, does that same kind of is, and I'm wondering how much that kind of informs a desire to kind of, you know, to grow the business and keep trying. So going back to that question again, then, is like, how much was growth part of it when you were first opening? Was the intention to sort of do 2, 3, 5, 20? You know, was it, or was it just kind of to see how this first one goes, and then we'll see if this is for us or
No,
not?
my instincts are always go into something and go in full, and therefore, whilst it was an auxiliary part of my life between 2013 2014, it was very much, I had this notion that, you know, and we toyed with the name over the years, which is another longer story we don't have time for today, but in the end we came right back to WatchHouse. But I always had this notion of kind of, it'd be great to have different WatchHouses all over the country, possibly even the world, and this to be the WatchHouse. That was always kind of the starting point. But it was quite cool to think that this would be a place that people could come to in the future and kind of go, oh, wow, that's, you know, that's where WatchHouse started, you know, and same way you get the same thing with Starbucks in Seattle. I just think there's something quite special about that energy and that, I guess, provenance and history of what's happened. So I always liked that. So no, I would be telling a massive fib by saying that it was going to be a standalone shop, but it wasn't. And I think then, sort of 2014, we opened the first site. 2015, I needed a much needed sabbatical with my partner because we'd started the aquarium business whilst at university. So we took a 12-month period out and went traveling and spent most of our time hanging out in coffee shops all over the world, which was really, really interesting. I often reference Blue Bottle as a kind of a formative element of my, I guess, my view of specialty. And even then, you can see kind of this transformation from them being this kind of, I guess, shining light in our industry to then, some ways, some people have been semi-critical about them doing the deal they did with Nestle. And I think what's been fantastic about them is that they've managed to really scale and I think be true to what they believe in. And I really am very open about the fact that I look at them and see them as a business which has been able to sort of in some ways push that boundary about scalability, sustainability, and holding true to what they believe in, whilst also challenging the perception that doing more means you're not as good. So to come back to your point about the attention to detail, I would say we're not good at opening cafes. Like I say that we're still very much trying to get into the position where we open our doors on day one and things are all brilliant from day one. I think actually what tends to happen with us is we open in the first month, we're still snagging, and luckily our great customers don't necessarily realize, because the overall experience is obviously different to what else you find in certainly in the UK. And I think therefore it's a never-ending attention to detail and task for us. But no, I think that as we've scaled our business, we've actually improved upon our ability to have close attention to detail towards standards, towards customer experience, towards product quality. And I think that mantra of looking to try and push and be better as you get bigger is something that we really want to foster in the business. So I think where I struggle, I guess, in the full honesty here, is I have a very, very high attention to detail, I guess professionally, but also personally, and sometimes that can kind of manifest itself into being quite a frustrated sort of I guess a real challenge for me to kind of channel that attention to detail, but in a way which feels very positive. So I can be known if WatchHouse staff, if I walk into a site and something isn't right, it really does sort of grate on me. And I think in some ways I have to kind of take that, make a little note, come back to it in 25 minutes.
But it's hard. You're making a note. If you to have the restraint to make a note of it and not just kind of say something there in the moment in the middle of a busy shift, that's kudos. So that's good. I've the attention to detail. There's two things you're saying there I think are interesting. One is in terms of these kind of, I had a former employer who used to hate the idea of soft openings because it was always like, this sort of, you're sending a message like, this isn't going to be great. We're going to try, we're going to you're going to beta test this for us, and you're probably going to have some bad experiences in the hope that we will then learn from that. And so in a month's time be better, or next week be better. And there is something to be said for just kind of we're open and we've got our act together and here we go. And there's a confidence in that, and it's impressive, but it's tough. It's so tough, especially because of going back to just not knowing how people are going to use your space, despite how much work went designing it. But to the piece about that attention to detail, Doug Zell, the founder of Intelligentsia, used to work. He used to always talk about if one light is broken, he would, and you might be saying this, he would phone nonstop the manager of that store until it was done. He would call every hour or so until the light was done, and his whole feeling all the time was, if people can't trust you to get the small things right, why would they trust you to get the big things? And it was just that the sort of compounding implication of all those little small misses, those small problems, is it just creates trust and a sense of lack of confidence in the experience. And I do think there's truth to that. I think there's also a point where you're focusing on the wrong problem, but there is a time when it's very true. So going back then to the sort of this kind of very clear idea of growth from there from the outset, this very idea of kind of scaling up. Wouldn't it be great if we had WatchHouses all across the UK? How has the staff responded to that? Is that exciting for them? Do they feel they're part of something? Is it Is it challenging for them? Is there any kind of tension in that?
I think, I mean, I guess, there's a whole story with our growth, right? Like, we started as a one-shop operator, and we got to three different spaces, and at that point we hadn't basically integrated on our coffee, and we hadn't really pushed that boundary in terms of challenging ourselves, certainly on the coffee side, within our own control, right? And I think during lockdown, actually, we launched our roastery, and I think I always vividly remember, I can't remember who it is, so I can't be that vivid, but I do remember someone saying to me that one of the biggest changes in within a specialty coffee company, you start creating, so you start roasting your own coffee and putting your own stamp on what you're doing. And I think it's been a really, really important change for our business. And I think, I hear obviously a lot in the media about staff shortages, and of course I know they're there, but we're hugely lucky in that we don't have any staff shortages at all, while still being able to scale and still get a lot of inquiries for people to join the business. And I think the reason for it fundamentally is that the same feeling of, I guess, of authenticity. I mean, you probably can see behind, we've got a big brand, which wasn't placed there, by the way. This is our meeting room talking. But behind there is our brand story, and on that brand story, it talks about authenticity. And I think that resonates with not only our customers, but I think it also significantly resonates with our staff and our incoming staff. And again, I'm very open to say that, without sort of pinging Blue Bottle around too much, I remember spending time in New York for 6 weeks or so in 2019, and spending time speaking to staff at some of their cafes, and also spending time speaking to some other operators who I won't name. And it was incredible, that the engagement level, and I kind of came away thinking to myself that, for us to really foster a great culture within our business, we need to invest, and I mean genuinely, in our culture, and our really getting our teams into the same vision of what we're trying to achieve, which for us is to be the bench, which is a big claim to make. But if you don't shoot, you're not going to get anywhere near it. So basically said to our teams is, you come in to our business for the first 2 weeks, no time whatsoever in a front of house capacity. Like, we really want to and really dive into our business before you start engaging with our customers. And then we go through a full sort of 30, 60, 90-day program with our teams to make sure that they have their ambitions and targets. And this is something that's been a work in progress, right? There's many people in our business that didn't go through this process off the bat. So, and they're now having to re-go with our target guys. So I think fundamentally the teams understand the vision. I think it needs to be reinforced, like always. Now, 35 people in our business. And it's about making sure we can continue that authenticity, and for us to properly be able to scale.
Yeah. So I want to make sure, my connection was a little bad there for a moment, so I'm not sure if yours is still running okay there, but if you can hear me okay. But I caught most of what you said there in terms of the sort of the conveying that vision for the staff, but being very transparent about what you're trying to achieve, the sort of being authentic about it, and hoping that in turn creates this culture that is sort of, that I guess aids with retention of staff, and sort of, I think that's always a challenge, is if you are, for those when you don't have that retention, but you're trying to invest in that culture in a sense of it just being investing into a gap, that's a bucket that's always empty, got a hole in it, and it's just always emptying, and how do you sort of fill it up? And I would certainly agree that those businesses that you tend to see that have a really great culture, where you can see that the staff enjoy working there, that the staff believe in what's being done, that they that's magnetic. That's magnetic, and that's very visible outside. I think it's very visible from outside of the company. I think Roland's just checking his
internet.
I think it's back, Roland. Now, while Roland's just checking that, I'm going to just quite a few questions coming up inside. So I'm going to look through some of these questions. think you're okay again, Roland.
There we go.
So
Are we back?
you're back. You're good. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, great. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Great. The joys of virtual and forced to do these things online. But I gotta say there's benefits to that. So I just want to stay on this before we jump into all the questions here from that the audience are bringing in. I wanted to is there a sort of like, have you encountered or observed much sort of reticence or people being put off by the sort of very being that open about, we want to build lots and lots of shops, we want to grow, we want to get big, we want to take our roasting in-house, we want to build our food program, we want to have shops across London, you know, strong online program, we want to make a profit, you know, does that narrative, do you find that kind of is ever problematic for people, or is that something you've observed? And I'm just curious about that one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for those that know me, they know that I'm a fairly straight speaking person. We have I'll tell you, we've got 4 pillars within our business that we, which are offer great product or places that in our industry. I know you and I have spoken about this at length, but I think in our there is this kind of dirty feeling towards profit, you know, and I think I understand, obviously entirely understand where that comes from and how it's been in many ways bastardized by, you know, people who have gone before, and not always, but it has to be said, you know, we know the story, we know the history, but I think that we need to now be confident enough to say that profit is a fundamental to what we're doing. And we use the word motivating profit because the ability for that profit gives us the opportunity to go off and do great things. It gives us an opportunity, of course, to pay our shareholders and make sure that we return an income on the capital that they've invested in us and that they've backed us. But it also gives us an opportunity significantly to go off and do things like London Living Wage, and which is something that we as a business are working towards at the moment. And it's a very important part of what we're doing right now. And I think, you know, 135 people in the business it's a big task for us, but it's something that's right up high on our what we're doing. Is this? I don't know if we're frozen again, are we?
Your connection is a little dropping in and out, and I don't know if it's mine as well. It could be mine. You never quite know about these things, but you're good for a bit and then it drops. How about right now?
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we could. I think we can hear you okay now. It's better, I think. But I was catching what you were saying, Roland, in terms of that it is that by the necessity of pursuing a profit, making sure the business is profitable, is what in turn allows you to, you know, both satisfy shareholders and satisfy invest in programs that are important and to creating that culture, retaining staff, providing, you know, as you said, working towards London Living Wage and things like that. Yeah, I definitely, I think what you said before about like it is sometimes too quickly conflated with very, very large businesses that have maybe dominated certain industries in the past, and it isn't really that. It makes the word profit so charged and I think muddied, so that when someone tries to talk about, like, we want to do a healthy turnover, because that allows us to grow, it allows us to provide professional development paths for people within the organization, etc., etc. But it's an interesting one. Okay, you seem good right now.
Yeah, I flipped onto my
okay. Great. Well, I'm gonna jump into some questions here that some of the audience. So, question for Roland. He mentioned he hopes to be able to hit a point where he can open new locations without needing a month for snag lists to fix issues. My question in two parts is, what are those kind of usual snags you have to address, and what changes are you implementing to address those before doors open?
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me, so I'll just carry on talking, and
You're fine.
hopefully you get to hear what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's you know, opening complicated, high attention to detail. I mean, I think coming back to the authenticity point, right? Like our customers walk in, and in some ways, I mean, we've never just come in and go like, oh, where's your umbrella stand? Like they don't do that. Like they come in and kind of, or I remember being interviewed actually for the R200 hospitality video a couple of weeks ago. We just opened St Mary's Axe on a new site. And I remember sitting on an exposed green MDF, non-leathered banquette seating. And the guys from R200 were very good because they kind of put the camera just up at my head height and didn't see the seat. And I remember sitting there thinking, we as a business needs to get ourselves into a position where we're able to do this in a more sustainable way and a way which is more seamless. And I think the things that we've put in place is that we've brought in somebody now who works as our NSO manager, or new store opening manager, who basically her role is to come in and effectively take the reins of the site from 3 or 4 weeks out from a project completion, and then take that through to full snagging and completion. So that's been a big change. I think also having a really good project manager in place is a really important. I think historically, I remember I designed Verum basically on the back of a cigarette packet, and then into SketchUp, and we basically had a situation where we would design very hand to mouth, and again it was authentic, so people liked it, but it wasn't done in a very methodical. Good project manager that we work with, I mean, I've trusted contractors that we work with, and our design team, a good team.
Oh, dropping your back.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I don't think this is me because we've never had a problem. It may be, but I've changed internet connections here, so we'll have to see if it's something else, maybe.
Possibly. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, to answer the question, I think having a really good project manager, a really good design team, having a set checklist of things that you need to ensure that you look after, and you actually program that in. We use a program now, you guys may have heard of it, Monday.com, which is a really good project management program, which helps the ability to actually sort of flow in what you're doing. But again, like I just, it's a desire to get better and better, but I also think like fundamentally, I think what matters is that people see what we're about, and it's authentic and it's real, and it is warts and all. Like it's not. People want real experiences, and that's what they get.
The new store opening role is fascinating. I haven't heard of that before. The fact that you're investing in that is really interesting, and I've always found that it's so hard to. I mean, it's like the easiest thing that you would imagine is just kind of learn from the lessons in the last one, and just sometimes it's the sort of discipline it takes to kind of write it all down and go, we didn't get order that on time. This always takes longer than we think it'll take. Blah blah blah. To then internalize all that and refine it for the next one, and just the institutional to kind of internalize and institutionalize that knowledge is tough, especially opening at the rate you're opening. Okay,
and I guess the other thing, just the other one thing to add on that, of course, is that when you're opening with different, our cafes are different, right? So we use different materiality. Even the equipment at times is different, right? We don't just use one type of coffee machine, and so it is an ever-ending kind of, I guess, the evolution of what we're doing, and therefore that in itself presents a challenge. But I think it's one that we can overcome, and I think it leads to a better, organic, real experience.
So actually, I want to jump in on that, because I know you said before, like, so I think I would say WatchHouse has quite a consistent brand experience, and I think it's what I found impressive about it was the way that translates from in-store to digital to, you know, social web, is that and even in when you order things online, the way they arrive, the packaging, I think you guys do a really good job of having the consistency in those different brand touch points. And it's interesting then to think about when you're opening these locations, when it's not necessarily cookie cutter, because you're not buying the same kind of box every time. How much work, how do you kind of reconcile that need to make something feel bespoke to a neighborhood, bespoke to a community, authentic, whilst also feeling very clearly tied into a broader idea, the brand?
I mean, I guess how we do it from a sort of physical bricks and mortar experience is that we take a very holistic view of the space that we're going into. And I know, again, there's a lot of these sort of buzzwords now, you hear an awful lot, but I think, the provenance of the space, and ultimately what the community wants, what we need and what we want to do as well. And I think the ability there to actually sort of look at that before you sort of break ground, as it were, is really important. And again, like I'm saying that from a position where, we've now got institutional backers in our business. We've got economies of scope and scale that we can sit back and have that luxury. So I think if you're one or two, we certainly weren't doing that when we first opened our site, right? It was kind of like, oh, I want to open something nice. What do I want to do? It wasn't, sort of let's go off and paint a fence and then decide what we're going to do afterwards, And I think now we take much more time and consideration in how our expression and our language is used within our spaces, making sure that we have as much consistency as possible, but it is also consistently innovating and pushing that benchmark, which I mentioned earlier, as high as it possibly can be. There is a conflict, of course, between wanting to try and get operationally efficient in what we're doing and also ensuring that we are challenging that perception of innovation, really. And I think that's an ongoing conflict, and we're comfortable with that conflict. It's something that we have to live with. But what we think comes out the other end of the machine, as it were, is a really great cafe. And I think as well, like as they will say, you're in as good as your last gig, as it were. And I feel that in some ways we are consistently trying to get better and better as we open more and more spaces and evolve and ultimately become better what we do for a living. And I think there's something exciting about that as a group of individuals and as a culture.
I like that. I like what you said there about just the kind of if there is tension in figuring out how you mix that local design to bigger brand, that like the output is a positive thing, that it leads to character, leads to sort of, that's something maybe more memorable and more emotionally relevant to that location and its community. Okay, another question here. In terms of finding good business partners or staff members to grow your coffee team family, and although I know I've heard the word family has been seen as problematic recently in coffee shops, but in your opinion, what are the most important qualities and traits and skills to look for? I guess it's kind of a broad question in terms of just the people you want to work with and work with you. Is there certain traits that you're consistently looking for?
Our former coffee roasters, Ozone Coffee Roasters, who supported us for many years and were fantastic throughout that period of our growth. I remember one of the people there recommended, they're obviously, for those that don't know, a Kiwi, originally Kiwi coffee roastery from New Zealand, obviously, and they're now over here in London. And they said, you must read a book by a guy, I believe his name's John Kerr, but the book is basically behind the scenes. It's used now in sort of business education, basically. But the idea was it was behind the scenes look at the New Zealand All Blacks. And I remember reading it, and it was great. It was brilliant to read. But the mantra of hopefully we're not under any time language element here, but this notion of no dickheads was really important. And that was, it doesn't matter how great you are at rugby, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're a dickhead, you're out. And I think for us, genuinely great human beings in our business is a really important part. You can teach people anything, almost anything, but you can't teach them to have necessarily empathy, to be hardworking, to be committed, to be loyal, like all these really important human characteristics, which we should all aspire, in my opinion, to try and get better at. And I think fundamentally what we try and do is say to people, if you want to come and you want to share the vision of getting better, and you're willing to learn, and you don't have, we don't have the mantra of no decades, but the general principle here is to have good human beings, a bit more positive rather than negative. That's a really important part of our ability to scale. And I know that obviously being SCA, we're going to focus on coffee here, but there are people in our business who aren't coffee specialists, and we're quite proud of that. People who are in the business who have different areas of expertise within it, which contribute to the overall experience that we refer to as modern coffee, which is these tenets of excellence within the business that I discussed earlier in terms of people, product, passion, and ultimately profit. Those elements are really important to what we deem to be a genuinely modern coffee experience. And I think really for people to join us, they need to be happy to buy into that element of trying to pursue forever to be better, and for them to be ultimately good human beings. So I think that's kind of the prerequisites to joining our business. Yeah.
That's as good as answer as any, I think, for that. I mean, it makes total sense. Sorry, there's something I'm feeling it. I want to ask my own questions, but before I ask this next question, I do think what you just said about because I want to talk as well, Roland, because I like to sound in my own voice, and I feel like everyone here just listen to you, but I want to talk. I think that's the beauty of coffee, is that it is so big. It does require so much. And actually a big part of this program, this retail summit we've launched, is about acknowledging the sort of I think in the US they refer to as allied businesses, but there are so many people involved in making great coffee experiences happen. And a lot of that role does not require people to be experts in coffee. It is the things that orbit that, the things that are congruent, the things that lead into it, whether it's design, just finance, or good people, hiring and practices. And there's just so many other areas that make coffee experiences possible. And we want to create platforms where we can talk about that and learn about that, and expose, our community to ideas on how to create better structures for great coffee to shine, and better platforms. So that is all part and parcel of it. So that said, what are you most excited about in coffee right now? And let's go with that definition of coffee being kind of the business of it.
Yeah, I think the technological elements is significant, and I think for us, I know tech, the buzzword at the moment for everything, but I do think the ability to qualitatively engage with your consumer via tech, I think, is going to be a really, really interesting, exciting way exciting thing to explore over the next couple of years. Spoken before about potentially tokenization of the experience with our consumers, and some of you may be aware of sort of the NFT technology, or the phenomena that's kind of come out of principally the States in the last 18 months or so, which is this notion of non-fungible tokens, and I guess changing the medium for communication with your consumer base. And I think it's an interesting thing that we're looking at. And that could be something as simple as issuing 10,000 tokens, WatchHouse tokens, which would have effectively a contract attached to those tokens, which would enable the holder of that token to have access to educational resource. It can have things such as an ability to say to somebody, if you come to one of our houses and you're to our brand and you do what you do within sort of a given month, if there's a consecutive element of, and you use your token, then that enables you to have access to new resources from the business. So it's very early days for us to kind of explore this, but I think it's super, super interesting. And obviously, once you then sort of throw the blockchain technology into that as well, I think it's that's kind of already happening out of Colombia at the moment. There's a few companies out there looking to try and get blockchain through, so that again, for our industry, given you're literally going from bean to cup, what does that actually mean? Well, the ability to look at blockchain to actually literally show the person drinking this cup of coffee, like what's in how that's gone, how the person's been paid. There's always going to be limitations about this, ultimately the data that you get in terms of qualitative elements and farming practices and actual pay and working conditions, which of course is the struggle that we have. But I think there's really interesting technology now within our space, which I think enables a greater level of connectivity and ultimately, back to that word, authenticity about what you're doing. So that's really cool. And I also think that the ability for us to now maybe reach new areas in terms of buying coffees, which we haven't maybe been able to very easily, and I guess in some ways the ability to break down barriers in terms of communication with origin, I think is really, really interesting thing as well. So I think that's I kind of focus again around tech and communication, but I think these are the kind of things that we're interested in, particularly at the moment. And then in-store experiences, there's some great technological changes in terms of the hardware that we're using within store, and we've got a few very interesting products that we're going to be launching in the next period. One of which is a chaff soda, which we're working on, which is quite cool, which we're sort of trying to pioneer and innovate within our space, and which would be quite cool as well. So there are some interesting things that we're working on at the moment.
That's cool. Chaff soda sounds interesting. I know you told me about it before.
Yeah.
Definitely try it. There's a lot of questions, and I'm trying to be. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them, so I'm scanning for one that maybe touch on something we haven't touched. One here: how did you translate the feel of the brand into retail coffee offering to translate the best of the brand back into customers' homes? I think that is something.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's obviously a challenge to try and ensure that it's lovely to hear Stephen say that there's a consistency in delivery between the different mediums that we work within, but it is a challenge, of course. I mean, we are. I like to think, and there will be others out there, but one springs to mind. We're the only, I think, coffee roastery that I know, certainly in central London, is actively not doing wholesale. Like, we're not doing a wholesale program for our business. We don't want to do that, and it isn't true to the tenets of our business and what we want to do. But of course, why isn't it? Well, I want people to come to a WatchHouse and receive the modern coffee experience, the holistic experience that we want to try and offer. And that can be their take on it, right? We're not trying to force down anyone's neck like our views. We all set the platform and they can live within that platform as they see fit. And we have that all the time. And I think it's something that we're really proud of, But I think in terms of taking that experience back home, yeah, I mean, you've got to make sure that things are done correctly. Obviously the coffee needs to be obviously adequately packaged and looked after as much as possible. And we're just about to release our own Miron glass patented jar, which basically keeps the light out of from the coffee, but it's also quite a nice thing to keep in your home. So it's a nice feeling. It's some nice attention to details on that, which launches in a couple of weeks' time. So I guess it's never going to be perfect. We're always going to try and make sure that we try and produce great products that can be enjoyed at home. But I think something we are working on over the next 6 to 12 months is then a qualitative educational resource whereby actually if you buy, a Colombian coffee from us or an Ethiopian coffee from us, and you will get a ability to actually get your own customized video, which will say, this is how we recommend you use it. If you don't want to use it that way, completely fine, but this is how we recommend you do it. And, there'll be sort of a more qualitative experience on that. And I think Stephen and I, as aspiring athletes, often talk about the fact that we go to the gym or try to go to the gym. And I've recently taken up Peloton, as many people I think have. And I think that qualitative at-home experience is absolutely possible. It's just about investing correctly in the technology and the educational resource to provide that. So in the same way you would if you walked into a WatchHouse and you spoke to one of our baristas, he did ask, you ask a question, you get a great answer, and therefore we need to provide that same experience at home.
Well, you threw me with your gym reference, but yeah,
sorry.
It's okay. I'm just scanning here for questions. We've got 9 minutes left. So from Kurt, what was something that you didn't anticipate when opening your business that you wish you knew before?
That's a good question. I think something that I find frustrating is something I think, again, Stephen, you and I have discussed, is we have to create a toolkit to provide to people who open cafes. Go, right, this is what you need. These are your employment contracts. This is your training center. This is the EPOS system you need. You know, we as an industry seem to kind of get the rump side of an EPOS system, a till system for those that don't know, from kind of out of the restaurant world, right? It's not really designed properly for our use. We kind of get along with it, fine. But equally, we don't really get this sort of toolkit for an operator. If you start your own cafe, you kind of just have to muddle your way through. And of course, there are resources, of course, no less than on the SCA. But I think we need to be better in an industry kind of providing that. And I go back to Ozo; they were great when we opened. You know, they really came to us and said, "Yeah, this is kind of what you need to do as a toolkit," which was really, really helpful. But I think there needs to be more of that, where we kind of know that we've got proper educational resources, proper HR, proper payroll. You know, our operational checks and balances are properly done. So, you know, we use a system called Trail, which is a really great system. It's used by many operators now in the UK, and it gives you the ability to actually properly do health and safety checks and ensure that you've got good compliance. And there's all these things, and it feels a little bit fragmented that when we start a business, we don't really have a clue, and that isn't good enough. So I think in terms of what I would like to do in terms of opening up, you know, the challenges from opening our business, I think what I'd like to try and see is a better I guess, a better exploration of that resource, so that people who open cafes can really make sure they learn from the mistakes ultimately of others. And I think we need to be better at that.
I mean, that's a beautiful tie into the whole virtue of this platform we're trying to build here, is that the fact that this is all being made available for free thanks to our sponsors, but it's that we're recording. The idea is for, and this is not sort of meant to be kind of a self-serving plug, but it is that we are very cognizant that the lack of awareness, or the difficulty in accessing that knowledge of, as you said, learning from others, is it's a real obstacle. And so one of the things we're trying to do here is to build this library of resources that is always available for free. You just go to retail.sca.coffee. We'll always be adding to it, and the view is to do more of these summits where we capture these conversations, because it's immensely helpful hearing someone like yourself talk about how you approach these things and what struggles you.
And equally, just to say, if anyone's watching this and they want more chat about that, just reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn, and I'll give you sort of our full technical stack within our business, so that you can see how we do what we do. I'm fully sort of open source on that.
Very generous. Another question here, maybe our last. What do you think about the future of the coffee industry? With so many coffee shops opening every year, is it a bubble that's going to explode, or do you see room for it to become even bigger? One would hope you see.
Yeah. No, it's a bubble. We're screwed. No, I think that there is. I mean, this is obviously well-trodden ground in terms of a question and an answer. You only need to go to Melbourne, Australia, to look and see, saturation, they're still opening. They're still opening great spaces, and they're pushing the bar higher. I think we aren't anywhere near saturation at all. I mean, in my opinion. I mean, I'm talking here as a primarily central London operator. Obviously, we've got a site opening in Bath in a few months' time, and which will be an interesting challenge for us. But I think, even outside of central London, which is obviously more mature than most, there's so much opportunity within the UK. And even then, you go to an area that springs to mind. I mean, Brighton is a really good example, I think, where you've got probably a high density of specialty shops versus the native population. You just get better. I just think you improve, you give people the opportunity. To second wave guys hanging around doing what they're doing, and more power to them. But there's still plenty of opportunity for us to get out there and really engage people. And I think we all hear still people saying, "Oh, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink tea," and stuff. And and that's obviously it's fine. But I also think there's an educational element there, of exposure, and I think we are very, very far away. 65 million people from being anywhere near saturation in our sector, and that's just the UK, and that's before even going abroad, where we're even. Of course, there's areas within the world which are significantly different, areas which have got huge amounts of people that just don't have exposure to specialty. we've got so much opportunity here to develop.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you still need to know where to go to have a good coffee. Just arrive in a city. If you're just chancing your arm, I think the chances are you still will get a coffee that wasn't prepared with care, whichever stage we're talking about in the production. Um, um, well, I don't. That's a bit too sweeping, but I think just the point is like, I think is we can sometimes, because you're in it, it seems like it's everywhere. It seems like that it's just everywhere. But I'm still always amazed at when I can't meet new people, how basic the level of knowledge is around what the product is at its core. And I've had chats with very large companies who have identified that basically just the sheer size of the potential bring more people in who are not in sort of in the who are specialty consumers or who would be seeking out coffee for its quality, not just for its caffeine kick or things like that. That is still, even though it feels like we've been working on that narrative for quite a while, it is still very, very much the change that much. It's just it's good that there's more places to go. And I think always that's part of it, is just having, good coffee. Coffee it doesn't have to be miraculous, life changing all the time. It is sometimes the bar is just, is it sweet? Is it clean? Is there some nice flavors in here? I think if we can also just kind of, I'm talking too much. Roland, thank you so much for giving us your time this morning, and for
You're very
answering
welcome.
all the questions, and for sharing the story of WatchHouse. Could you just maybe, you mentioned you're opening in Bath soon. You just opened another branch in London. Kind of where are we at now in terms of the growth plan at the moment?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me on, and apologies for the Wi-Fi issues midway through. I mean, our business now, we've got seven houses, as we refer to them, open. We have 3 others in construction at the moment, which is Bishopsgate, not too far away from our Mary's Act site that we opened a month ago, in August. We've got a site opening in Seven Dials, in the former site of Timber Yard, who closed down there, and then we were approached by the landlord, which is really exciting. We have a site that we're looking at the moment. We're in legals on in Covent Garden, Kings Road. We're about discussions with a place in Canary Wharf at the moment. So there's loads of things that we're working on at the moment, and of course, there's all the internal that we're doing in terms of the technological development and the things that we've discussed here today already. So Bath will be a challenge, of course, but it's one in which we feel confident of taking on, and I think that it feels like the right space to us, and the right area. So we're excited by that.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on all the success so far. And
Thank you.
We're excited to see what happens next. And thanks for being part of helping us kick off day one.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you all soon, and enjoy what's coming next. So I will say goodbye. Bye everyone.
Bye.